What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. You might have heard that about a month ago, Disney purchased the entertainment properties of Fox. If you are a comic book fan, then that means that Disney, via the Marvel Cinematic Universe, can now incorporate the Fantastic Four and the X-Men into their enormous shared universe that they have been building for 10 years. You may have also heard that I am an X-Men fan. Once upon a time, I wasn't too keen on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Didn't really like most of what they had to offer. On the flip side, I was a huge fan of the Fox X-Men movies. But the years have changed me. Here lately, I haven't been feeling the Fox X-Men properties, and I've gotten more and more excited about the MCU. So now that Disney has purchased the Fox Entertainment properties, what are they going to do with them? Specifically, what are they going to do with the X-Men? While I am almost certain that all or most of these things will not happen, I thought of 5 things that I would like to see Disney do with the X-Men now that they own them. Number 1, complete reboot. I don't want any connection to the Fox movies that we've had over the last 18 years. I like some of the X-Men movies we've gotten, but my biggest problem, arguably since X-Men Origins Wolverine, is that the people making these movies are incapable of making a movie that exists in a larger universe. This problem has only gotten worse since Days of Future Past, to the point where I am completely apathetic about what happens in the X-Men movies. I don't want to see them bringing Ty Sheridan or Sophie Turner into the MCU when the X-Men movies they've been involved with were already kinda sort of connected to the previous movies in the Fox universe. And I definitely don't want to see them try to say that the Fox movies were already part of the MCU, as there have been so many contradictory events in those movies, it would make my head explode trying to see them integrate these two universes. So if we bring in Cyclops into the MCU, I want a new actor with a clean slate of backstory. Same for Storm, Magneto, Professor X, Jean, etc. You can even say that these guys have been active for a little while and have been keeping a low profile, kind of like what they did in the first X-Men movie. I wouldn't mind that, but I don't want them to try to integrate anything they've done in the Fox movies into the MCU. This first point is already looking at least a little unlikely though. If they did do a full-on clean break reboot and reintroduce these characters with clean slates into the MCU, the earliest we would see any of that would probably be around 2020 if they started working on it right now. So they've got a little bit of time to figure things out. But already some of what I'm hearing makes this look a little fuzzy. At the moment, there are still talks of going forward with an X-Force movie and a Gambit movie. Now admittedly, both of these projects have been in development Hades for a long time, so there's nothing concrete at the moment. But if you ask me, it would make more sense to introduce the main X-Men in a team movie before giving us all of these side movies. And just today, as of this recording, there is talks of a solo Kitty Pryde movie in the works. In the works could mean that someone suggested they do it and they didn't hate the idea, so don't get attached to this idea if you are a Kitty fan. But the fact that they are talking about doing some of these side movies before doing a full-on reboot is troubling if you're me. Also, The Gifted has been renewed for a second season. Now, I've never actually watched The Gifted, but from what I understand, it is a lot like most of the recent crop of X-Men movies, where it wants to be part of the larger X-Men universe, but its connections are vague and tenuous at best. I don't know if The Gifted could be retrofitted to be part of the MCU, or if it will still be going by the time the MCU people are ready to do their own angle on the X-Men. In Hollywood time, 2 years is a long time, and a lot could happen in that time. Number 2, this one is probably obvious, but I want to see whoever guides the X-Men into the MCU to take full advantage of all the weird things that are par for the course in the X-Men universe. Space princesses, cockroach aliens, hidden tropical civilizations in Antarctica, space demon goddesses, you name it, the X-Men has it. A big problem I've had with the last several X-Men movies is that they've tried to keep things much more grounded than pretty much all of their superhero movie contemporaries. That was fine in 2000 when the superhero movie industry was still recovering from Batman and Robin, and anything with even a hint of non-reality had to throw in the black leather like The Matrix or Blade or the X-Men. But that was 18 years ago, and it's fine to have weird sci-fi fantasy stuff thrown in with the superhero stuff. In fact, it's expected by this point, since a lot of the hatred that I've seen towards the X-Men movies didn't really start until the MCU started and showed people that there was another way. I'm willing to bet if Disney does reboot the X-Men and bring things into the existing MCU, then they will take a much more out there comic booky approach. Number 3, this is more of a specific plot thing that I would like to see. I would like to see Rogue start off as a bad guy, as she did in the comics when she was first introduced. She could be a member of Mystique's team, or she could be off doing her own thing. If she's working for Mystique, maybe you could introduce Rogue in the Captain Marvel movie. Probably not the first one because they're too far into that to actually work her into the plot in a major way. But if they do a second Captain Marvel movie, what if Mystique wants to steal Kree secrets or technology and sell them to the highest bidder on Earth? She sends Rogue to get information from Carol, and we get a scene similar to their encounter in the comics before Rogue joined the X-Men. In this case, I would say Carol's reaction is not as severe as it was in the comics. Rogue maybe gets some of Carol's power, but doesn't completely depower Carol. Carol may have gaps in her memory, but she still knows who she is, unlike in the comics where her memories were more or less completely blank. This could still lead to Rogue effectively having two personalities in her brain, which might lead her to seek out professional help when she sees Mystique isn't able to help her cope with this. And yeah, the first Captain Marvel movie is going to be set in the early 1990s. It's way too early to speculate on when the second one, if there is a second one, will be set. I'm assuming they'll do something where Carol goes into space at the end of the first movie and comes back to Earth roughly 30 years later, but she's more or less still the same age thanks to weird theory of relativity stuff. Then the door is wide open for Rogue and Mystique to appear as antagonists for Carol and then later show up in the X-Men movies. Number 4, let's contemporize Magneto a little bit. In the comics, since the early 1980s, Magneto's origin has always been tied to being a Holocaust survivor. They could keep this as part of his origin and say that at some point he was de-aged like he was in the comics by a synthetic mutant called Alpha, but I don't really want them to do that. It'd just be needlessly complicated, I think. So that leaves us with keep his origin in the Holocaust and make him part of the backstory of the MCU, or move him away from the Holocaust and put him in the present day. Nathaniel of Council of Geeks did a video where he talked about the likelihood of each possibility and how they could do each one. He said that if they kept him as a Holocaust survivor, then they would likely say that he died maybe in the 1970s and was a mutants' rights activist who was covered up by some other organization trying to keep the existence of mutants a secret. While I think it'd be very bold to say that Magneto already lived and died, and not use him in these movies, I wouldn't want to see them do that. I like Magneto too much, and I'd want to see him interact with the present-day Marvel Universe. So if they youthen him up a little bit, that would mean tying him to some other ethnic cleansing which we as a society unfortunately have no shortage of. For example, you could say he's a teenager during the Bosnian War of the early 1990s. I guess you could say he was a survivor of Sokovia's destruction from Age of Ultron, but I see a number of problems with that one. One, I feel that that's too recent in the MCU history. Even if these movies do move in real time, Age of Ultron came out in 2014, and at the very earliest, we're going to be seeing the X-Men as part of the MCU in probably 2020. If Magneto is a child or teenager during the incident of his formative years, like he was in the Fox movies and in some of the comics, then he would only be maybe in his early 20s by the time we see him in the MCU. I don't mind making Magneto younger than what he was in the Fox films, but I don't want him to be that young. I guess you could say he was already a full-grown adult during the incident that sets him down the path of the dark side, but then you reach my other problem with connecting him to Sokovia. This would effectively turn him into a clone of Baron Zemo from the Civil War movie. Zemo lost his family in the destruction of Sokovia and went after the Avengers. If Magneto lost his family in Sokovia, he would be angry at the Avengers and would then be an Avengers villain and in theory wouldn't have any beef with the X-Men. Sure, Magneto has fought the Avengers before in the comics, but we want him to be an X-Men villain first and foremost, right? I think it's better to just connect Magneto to some recent horror of the 1990s and age the character in real time, as we seem to be doing with everyone else in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And number 5, slow down. One of the problems I had with the Fox X-Men movies was how they wanted to shove every mutant into every movie. This really started as far back as X-Men 3, when you had characters like Psylocke, Multiple Man, Juggernaut, and Angel all serving as little more than cameos who could be removed from the plot and you would barely even notice. But these characters are all pretty important in the comics, and they each have a fan base. Nobody wants to see the MCU introduce 50 mutants in one movie and give none of them their due diligence. Start off small, give us a team of about 5 X-Men. I'd even say that the school does not need to be an actual school-sized school with a student body. That was a change I really liked in the first X-Men movie and later in Grant Morrison's new X-Men run, but I'm afraid that would offer them the chance to throw in a whole bunch of actual characters as background fan service cameos like Fox did, and I don't want that. And yeah, the Avengers movies changed and updated their cast with each movie. First Avengers movie sets up the team, next Avengers movie breaks down the team and adds 4 new members to what was left of the existing team, then Civil War further breaks that team apart and adds characters like Spider-Man and Black Panther into this universe. So I'm not saying that you can't add new characters. In the Fox movies, when X2 added Nightcrawler, they actually gave him stuff to do. He felt like a real fleshed out character. Never mind the fact that we didn't see him again for 13 years, and even then it was a pseudo prequel / reboot. But I want the initial wave of X-Men to all feel as fleshed out as the Avengers each did in the first Avengers movie. This might be a little bit more difficult since each of the Avengers had their own movie to pave the way to the Avengers movie, and I don't want to see a Jean Grey movie or a Beast movie. So it will be difficult to do that with the X-Men. But if you don't focus all of our screen time for multiple movies on Wolverine, I think you can at least make this more of an ensemble that rounds out more of the cast than the Fox movies did. And if you do the thing where Cyclops leaves the team, or Professor X goes into space with his girlfriend, or Colossus joins Magneto, then you can bolster the ranks with new additions. In this regard, I would wait to introduce Wolverine for a few movies. I know he's a cash cow, and it's foolish of me to hope that they hold off on him, but we spent enough time on him already in the Fox movies. I'd really like to see some other characters get a chance to shine before we bring him back in. And that was 5 things that I hope that Disney does now that they have the X-Men. I don't think that all all of these things or even most of these things are going to happen, but I would be pretty happy if at least a couple of these things happen. Anyway, I do look forward to seeing what they do, even if they don't do any of these things. And let me know what you guys think they're going to do in the comments below, or you can do your own video and then I'll watch that. Anyway, I will see you guys in the future with some other videos. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.